Stop scrolling for financial news right now. Put down your phone. Close that Bloomberg terminal. Ignore every headline about diplomatic progress and trade negotiations, because I'm about to tell you something the mainstream financial media will not tell you for at least another week. 3 separate crises are converging in the next 72 hours. Not 1, not 2, 3. And they're not arriving separately with time to prepare. They're landing in the same window, the same news cycle, same moment in market history. My name is Asian Guy, and what I'm about to walk you through is not speculation. It is not opinion. It is observable military deployment data, court documents, and vault inventory combined into a single narrative that the financial establishment does not want you to understand. I need you to hold 3 numbers in your mind simultaneously, not one at a time, all 3, side by side. The first number is 80. That is what the paper market in New York says. 1 ounce of silver is worth this exact moment. It's on your screen right now. It's on every financial ticker. It's what most people will act on. The second number is 69. That is what the miners, the actual human beings who blast silver out of rock, refine it, and physically deliver it to the world, are receiving in real settlement prices after navigating the paper market's delivery mechanics. 80 on the screen, 69 at the mine gate. That gap is not a transportation fee. It's not insurance. That gap is the paper market confessing in arithmetic that the price you see and the price the physical industry operates at are 2 completely separate realities running in parallel. The third number is 99. That is what the Shanghai market is willing to pay for physical silver right now. Today. This morning. Stand back and look at what 3 numbers are describing. New York paper price, 80. Miner settlement price, 69. Shanghai physical price, 99. 1 underlying asset, 3 different realities. And in a healthy market, these converge. Arbitrage forces them together. Price discovery works. But we are not in a healthy market. We are in a market operating under structural stress. Physical inventory is draining faster than it can be replenished. The entities that set the paper price have a documented interest in suppressing it. And the industrial demand pushing prices higher is being driven by forces that paper traders cannot control or vote on. These 3 numbers are not converging. They're diverging. They're moving in opposite directions simultaneously, like tectonic plates separating beneath a sea that appears calm on the surface. Underneath all 3 prices sits a single concrete fact. The Comex registered silver vault is hemorrhaging 20 million ounces per month. 88 million ounces of registered inventory divided by 20 million ounce monthly drain rate equals 4 months. 4 months of supply in a normal week. But this is not a normal week. What the next 72 hours adds to that drain rate is not a rounding error. It's a multiplier. And to understand why, you have to understand what's actually happening in 3 separate theaters: military, legal, and physical. The compression spring is already wound. The only question is what triggers the release and how fast it moves when it detonates. Let me paint a picture of what's actually happening on the military map right now, not what's being discussed in diplomatic back channels. Open a map of the Middle East. Focus on the Strait of Hormuz. That narrow waterway is where 20% of the world's oil flows through. 20%. Here's what U.S. military deployment data dated February 17, 2026 actually shows: 2 aircraft carrier strike groups positioned in a ring around Iran, over 160 fighter jets, nuclear-capable B-52 strategic bombers stationed at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which is the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command, multiple Tomahawk-capable submarines in position, and 1 specialized aircraft whose only operational purpose is to detect nuclear material in the atmosphere, all of it positioned in a ring. Around 1 country. A Trump administration advisor publicly stated a 90% probability of military action. The USS Gerald R. Ford is currently en route to the eastern Mediterranean, and U.S. officials have explicitly stated that its arrival is a key timing factor for operations. Now here's what the mainstream financial media is not telling you while they write cheerful stories about diplomatic progress in Geneva. China has dispatched 16 military cargo planes to Iran in the past month. Those aircraft likely carry defensive systems and logistical infrastructure. China is rebuilding Iran's air defense capabilities. Russia and China are conducting live joint naval exercises with Iran inside the Strait of Hormuz right now. This morning. Those exercises are designed specifically to complicate U.S. operational planning. Russia has agreed to supply Iran with 48 advanced Su-35 fighter jets. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov has explicitly warned that any U.S. strike carries serious consequences and cited the risk of nuclear incidents from operations near previously monitored facilities. China has signed a trilateral strategic charter with Russia covering joint military exercises and intelligence sharing. And it's purchasing 90% of Iran's oil exports, ensuring that maximum pressure campaigns don't collapse Iran's economy before negotiations conclude. As of this morning, Russian warships, Chinese naval vessels, Iranian Navy units, and Iranian Revolutionary Guard boats are all operating in coordinated formation inside the Strait of Hormuz in a joint exercise designated Maritime Security Belt 2026. This is not posturing, this is not improvisation. This is the BRICS alliance: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, operating not as a loose coalition of shared grievances but as a coordinated strategic bloc with one demonstrable objective: to make the cost of unilateral U.S. military action prohibitively high. They have not attempted to match U.S. military capability, which they cannot do on short notice. They have simply made any U.S. operation more complex, more diplomatically dangerous, and more prone to accidental escalation by being physically present. Experts at the Center for a New American Security confirmed that Russian and Chinese ships in those waters do not pose a direct military threat to U.S. forces, but they dramatically complicate operational planning. You must account for sensor arrays that could provide advanced warning. You must ensure your munitions don't create an incident involving a Russian or Chinese vessel. And you must accept that any accident in those waters could transform what's intended as a limited strike into something with consequences no planning document anticipated. This is strategic genius. They're not fighting. They're raising the price of fighting. And as that price rises, as the uncertainty premium embedded in every barrel of oil flowing through that strait increases, the case for gold and silver as insurance against what that uncertainty produces becomes stronger with every hour those ships remain in formation. Now imagine you're the head of procurement for a major defense contractor. Your production lines require silver, not as a commodity hedge, as a structural input, guidance systems, satellite components, electronics for precision hardware. You cannot substitute aluminum. You cannot wait. Silver has to arrive on schedule. This morning, your procurement officer walks into your office with a report. It contains 3 data points. Data point 1, your primary delivery source, the Comex registered vault network, currently holds 88 million ounces of silver. It's draining at 20 million ounces per month. At that rate, you have roughly 4 months of supply before a delivery crisis becomes structural. Data point 2, the United States military has staged 2 aircraft carrier strike groups in the waters surrounding the country that controls 20% of global oil flow. B-52 strategic bombers, nuclear capable, are positioned at forward bases. Over 160 cargo flights have resupplied the region since January. A U.S. advisor states 90% probability of military action. The USS Gerald R. Ford is en route, and U.S. officials explicitly tied its arrival to the timing of operations. Data point 3, China has dispatched 16 military cargo planes to Iran. Russia and China are conducting live joint naval exercises with Iran inside the Strait of Hormuz right now. Analysts confirm those exercises are designed to complicate U.S. operational planning. Your procurement officer puts the report down and asks one question: if the Strait of Hormuz closes for even 2 weeks, if global shipping gets disrupted, if the refined silver scheduled to move from processors in Switzerland and Australia gets delayed by an unknown number of weeks, on top of a Comex vault already running at 4 months of runway, what do you do? The answer requires no advanced degree. You do not wait for a lower price. You do not hold out for a better entry. You call every supplier with accessible inventory. You offer whatever premium they require, and you lock up your supply right now before the procurement officer at the next desk makes the same calculation 2 hours from now and buys what you are going to buy. This is the mechanism. The physical shortage creates urgency. The geopolitical trigger eliminates the option to wait. When industrial buyers, defense contractors, solar manufacturers, electronics assemblers, EV battery producers all run the same calculation in the same narrow window, the $80 paper price in New York becomes a historical artifact. The real clearing price gets established by whoever arrives at the refiner's door with cash first. But while military assets move into position, a second crisis is unfolding quietly inside the U.S. Supreme Court. Trump's administration invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose sweeping tariffs. No president had ever used that specific statute for tariffs before. It was designed for sanctions during national security emergencies, Liberation Day tariffs, China tariffs, Canada and Mexico tariffs. The legal argument was that unprecedented trade deficits constituted a national emergency. Lower courts ruled that no president had ever stretched this law this far. They said the action exceeded the statute's scope. The Supreme Court heard arguments in November. Notably, both conservative and liberal justices expressed skepticism. Justice Barrett herself used the phrase, "a complete mess," to describe the implications of requiring refunds of tariff revenue already collected. Treasury Secretary Bessent warned publicly that the total refund obligation could approach $1 trillion by June if the court rules against the administration. Trump himself described that scenario as exactly that, a complete mess. And yet the court has held its decision for over 100 days, while the government continues collecting tariff revenue every single day. Today, Friday, February 20th, that ruling may come down. Here's why it matters specifically for silver and gold. The tariff regime is structurally inflationary. It raises the cost of imported inputs across the entire economy. It sustains pressure on the dollar. It reinforces the fundamental case for hard assets as a hedge against rising price levels. If the Supreme Court strikes it down, the immediate market reading is deflationary. The single largest source of administered inflation is removed. The dollar strengthens. In the short term, gold faces selling pressure and silver follows it down. That is the counterattack. It is not a blunt instrument. It is the judicial system operating on a 100-plus day timeline, delivering a ruling that the establishment hopes lands as a cold interruption to the metals rally precisely when the geopolitical premium is at its most elevated. It may work in the short term. A ruling against the tariffs could push gold back toward $4,500 and silver toward $70. That is the tactical window the counterattack aims to create. But here is the structural flaw in the strategy. A court can strike down a statute. It cannot rebuild a Comex fault. It cannot reverse the 111 million ounces of registered silver already drained over the past 5 months. It cannot put 16 Chinese military cargo planes back in the air towards somewhere other than Iran. It cannot cancel joint naval exercises running in the Strait of Hormuz. And most critically, it cannot undeploy B-52 bombers sitting on a runway in Qatar, or send the USS Gerald R. Ford back to port before it reaches the eastern Mediterranean. The paper mechanism and the judicial mechanism have reach over paper. They have no reach over hardware already in motion. While the carrier group's position and the court deliberates, a third front in this conflict runs quietly in the background. It is the front of managed perception. It is the one most likely to shake retail investors out of their positions before the real move occurs. Watch how the Iran situation is being framed in mainstream financial media this week. The diplomatic track receives prominent coverage. Envoys met Iran's foreign minister for 3 hours in Geneva. Both sides describe some progress. Talks are ongoing. A deal remains possible. This framing is doing significant work. It's designed to make you think the crisis is manageable, that diplomacy is working, that there's time. But here's what the same U.S. officials are saying privately to intelligence committees. That meeting was a nothing burger. Vice President Vance stated publicly that Iran has not acknowledged any of the Trump administration's red lines. The preconditions, permanent halt of uranium enrichment, limitation of ballistic missile programs, and of regional proxy support, are the same preconditions Iran's own officials have categorically rejected repeatedly. The diplomatic narrative is not an accurate representation of the actual state of negotiations. It is a perception management tool designed to create a false sense of time and options. When the real trigger comes, and it will come this week, the shift from progress in Geneva to military action imminent will be sudden and disorienting. The markets will react violently because the narrative bridge the establishment spent weeks building will collapse in minutes. But underneath all the diplomatic theater and court rulings and military positioning sits one immutable physical fact. The Comex vault is draining. 88 million ounces. 20 million ounces per month. 4 months of supply. That math does not change based on court rulings. That math does not change based on diplomatic statements. That math does not change based on geopolitical theater. The miners are receiving $69 for metal quoted at $80. They're not accepting a discount because they're stupid. They're accepting it because the settlement mechanics of the paper market routinely deliver divergent prices from the physical reality. Shanghai is paying $99. Not because they're speculating, because they understand that physical metal is becoming the asset that matters. And when procurement officers at defense contractors and solar manufacturers and EV battery producers all make emergency calls to secure silver supplies in the same 72-hour window, when the Strait of Hormuz faces disruption risk, when registered inventory approaches single-digit months of supply, the $80 price becomes unsustainable. Price discovery doesn't happen through orderly market mechanisms anymore. It happens through panic bidding. The establishment knows this is coming. They can access the same deployment maps. They can read the Comex inventory reports. They can see where the drain rate is headed. They are not going to allow gold at $5,027 and silver at $80 to climb further without deploying every available tool to push back. But those tools have limits. Court rulings move paper. They do not move oil tankers or military hardware or deployed assets. They do not rebuild inventory. They do not change the physics of scarcity. The spring is compressed. The trigger is in motion. And in the next 72 hours, the question shifts from if to how fast. So here's what you do right now. Stop waiting for permission from the financial media. Stop waiting for official confirmation that a crisis is real. Stop doubting your research because a diplomat gave a press conference about progress. The math is undeniable. The military positioning is observable. The vault drain is documented. The 3 converging catalysts are not theoretical. The only question is whether you'll position yourself before the market fully prices the reality, or whether you'll watch from the sidelines as everything accelerates. The convergence is coming. The 72-hour window is open. What you do with the next 72 hours determines whether you're ahead of or behind the move that's about to unfold.